It's been a tough couple of years, Natalie, and although often rewarding, being a race network leader can generally be extremely demanding and challenging, especially as in most cases, it's not your main job, which it's been talked about a few times here. What has been some of the challenges you've experienced in looking after your own well-being?
Thank you for the question, Javed, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. What have been some of the challenges? I'll pick out a few. I mean, and a lot of them have already been said, to be honest. The first one would be, for me, compassion fatigue, which should not be mixed up with burnout. But it's listening and hearing everyone's woes, stresses, etc. Can be quite mentally exhausting, and when you're trying to balance that against an actual genuine passion to want to help people, that can be one of a real tough challenge. It definitely drains us sometimes. We'll get to the end of a week and be like, wow, that was a really intense week. Another challenge is what I sort of inferred earlier, that personal investments that I've made a personal investment, not only of my time, but of my brain power, of my mental capacity, and a lot of time my physical presence, which will link on to my next point. Well, that means, because I'm so personally invested, if we get any setbacks, if the network gets any setbacks, I tend to take that quite personally. It isn't something I'm being paid to do, so I'm more likely to physically feel that as almost offensive. So that can be a challenge sometimes. And lastly, again, Justin mentioned this earlier, but that whole balancing the day job with the network activities, that is probably by far my biggest challenge, because it's so easy to let yourself go down a rabbit hole of, I say rabbit hole, but just let yourself go off into something that you really personally invested in and you really enjoy. On the plus side for me, I'm finding a lot of synergy between my day job and the network leadership. For example, I can talk about cases where we know that not looking after someone from a race perspective or a cultural heritage perspective can actually be detrimental to their health, their physical and mental health. So that uniquely is helps me in a way that I actually lead the network and I can push a lot of things through at HS2. But nevertheless, I'm still constantly balancing and making sure that, well, me and Ruby, my co-chair, that we're giving the right amount of time, because what we don't want to happen is someone turns around to us and says, well, you've not done XXX in your day job because you've been busy running the network. And we don't pay to do that, and then pull interest or funding away from that. So I'd say those are the three top challenges for me.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess the question we're asking everyone is, how have you managed to support yourself through these challenges?
Yeah, and again, Justin mentioned it earlier, that when you first start running a network and you decide to take up a role as co-chair or chair, I don't think anyone can predict how much time, effort, and energy that might take from you until you start doing it. So I would say the biggest support for me is having a co-chair. I would absolutely. I mean, I saw 68% of the audience today have a co-chair, which is absolutely, for me, a really important point. It means that you can share all of the heavy lifting, and that could be mental heavy lifting or physical heavy lifting of, meetings and discussions, and that it cuts all of those types of compassion fatigue that I just mentioned in half. And we can also give sort of unofficial coaching to one another. Myself and my co-chair, we work in different parts of the organisation, and we can often share conversations that we've had from different parts of the business. And also, I think Esther mentioned this earlier, actually, about the ability to disengage. Everyone needs a time, and to make time to disengage from network activities, network leadership activities, and having a co-chair enables you to do that. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was suffering from burnout, and I said to Ruby, I'm going to need to just step back for a bit. There's a lot going on. I need to step back. Can you do XXX? And it of course was yes. And vice versa, Ruby's been in the same place. And it's useful to have a co-chair. Another one is being really realistic about what we can achieve as a network, and not overstepping the mark and going into the EDI space, which is, we've got a fantastic EDI team at HS2 who are paid to do what they do. A reminder again, we are not paid to do this. So we have a really clear terms of reference. We've also developed a network strategy, which stops us from jumping too far ahead in terms of what we expect from one another and the business, because we're following the strategy and we're sticking to that terms of reference. I would highly recommend writing down what you intend to do, and sometimes reminding yourself of that, because you can, with your passion, get carried away and go off doing something else. So that helps me stay real about what I can do in terms of time and effort, because we can't boil the ocean at the end of the day. If we've got some ideas, 9 times out of 10, if you have an idea, and this has happened to me even just in this past week, where I've had an idea and I've remembered, actually it's in my strategy plan for next year, so I need to park it now and not get into it. And another way that I've supported myself is through mentoring. At HS2 we have a reverse mentoring program, which is fantastic. I had a great reverse mentor last year, and in the end it just ended up with us both sort of mentoring each other, to be honest. Also, courses. You can request courses. There are free courses you can go on. I've written one down, actually. It's the Radius Employee Network Leadership Program. I took that. It was fantastic. Also, put the pressure, if needed, onto your D&I teams and ask them to source some training for you if possible. Sometimes it can be a challenge with funding, but if you can demonstrate that the activities of your network is actually contributing to employee EVP, is what we call it, employee value proposition. If it's making people feel better at work, then they should invest in that. Also, I would say having a confidant. So we, as well as having my reverse mentor, we have an exec sponsor who I meet with once a month, and I can definitely offload onto him with him being our CEO and let him know what's happening. But I also have someone that's quite close to me in my directorate, who I speak to quite a lot about leadership and just support and guidance in general, just offloading, because I'm careful not to put too much on Ruby and vice versa as co-chairs. But also, is getting the business to see that actually investing in training us all will actually in turn benefit the business. Because if you know, this is Race Network leads and future leads. We all want to lead something in the future. So if you can convince your business that investing in you leading would be good for them, then it's always good.
And I think the other thing is, you know, your network members have a tough time. How do you support them with their well-being?
So we have a version of Safe Space, which we call Courageous Conversations. It's something that was coined Courageous Conversations by Jacobs, who worked closely with HS2. And that's simply a conversation format. So it's a session that we hold for an hour, the last Thursday of every month, and we invite our membership and anyone else, actually. The invite goes out to our members to come and talk about any other topics. So, for example, this month's Courageous Conversation, with it being Mental Health Awareness Week last week, we will be talking about mental health amongst the BAME community. That will be next Thursday. So we hold that once a month. It's had a significant impact on people at HS2, actually. In many, many different ways, because it's not just for Black and Asian and minority ethnic groups, it's also for our allies as well. So we hold this session, we pick a topic, people come, they talk, people just come and listen, they learn. We've heard lots of positive news stories about people contacting each other outside of Courageous Conversations based on what's been said inside a Courageous Conversation. And we always underpin that. We always start that off by creating a safe space, letting everyone know it's that safe space. It's almost like Chatham House rules. We ask people not to discuss anything that might be subject to a HR investigation. But really importantly, what we also do is proactively, and it's probably me in my day job, putting my day job hat on, proactively encourage people to access the occupational health and wellbeing services that we have at HS2 should they need to, but also they can reach out to us. We do tend to have an open door policy on our committee, but again, just being careful of that first point, not verging into compassion fatigue. But we do have a lot of support, and we do have mental health first aiders, and you did mention earlier that I'm one of them, so I do encourage people, reach out to me if you need to. So there's a constant sort of drip feed of support for our members.
Brilliant, thank you. And the final question, because obviously a very difficult, challenging conversation we've all been having, but you all do this and wake up the next day and you're a network lead again. So despite the challenge, what do you enjoy most about the role?
Personal satisfaction for me. I genuinely feel like I'm adding to the culture and texture of the organisation. The unfortunate murder of George Floyd opened up that conversation and started the conversation, and I really wanted to hold my organisation to account, and I wanted to make sure that, great that we've started this conversation, but how do we continue that? And whenever I poke the bear and have a look at what's going on behind me to see if there are any actions happening, it is gradually. Someone mentioned earlier as well, we need to understand that what we're trying to do is we're not going to be able to turn the switch on tomorrow and everything's going to be perfect in the world. It's slow sort of progressive steps, which I'm really proud to say that I think that our network is doing and is making within our organisation. So personal satisfaction, absolutely. We can see that change happening. People are now starting to get what we're trying to do, which is we're not trying to stand outside the organisation as an island. We're trying to align with what the organisation is trying to do. And we do that by aligning our terms of reference and our strategy to the overall EDI strategy at HS2, and also tapping into the other directorates in our team. So for example, within the organisation, So for example, contacting our skills, employment and education teams and seeing what their plan is for the year. They might be doing a number of school visits in a predominantly minority ethnic area. And I'll challenge them, have you thought about who you're sending to that? People like to see that people can only be what they can see. Who are you sending? And we challenge them. Our community and stakeholder engagement teams, you're going out into the community and you're talking to people. How are you representing yourself at HS2? I think it's really important. And I can see that change. I can see people now thinking, they'll come to us, which leads to my final point. People come to us as a network, as network member committee. They'll reach out to us for support and guidance. So I'm putting together this event in the middle of Birmingham, and it's a reggae festival. How should our approach be? What should we do? Would you come along? Can you ask your members to come and support HS2? And that's introduced a whole new layer of engagement. We've also got someone really senior in our organisation who's recently this week reached out to us to say, I want to understand what the BAME population feels at HS2 in my directorate, because my stats are telling me a different story to what I appear to be feeling when I walk into an office. So that really makes me happy to know that people are actually thinking, I'll go and ask Natalie or Ruby on all the answer to that, or let's see what the Reach network say. So I do feel that we're making a difference.